Everyone knows that it's crucial to save money for our financial future. But charts say that most people don't really save as much as they should. That's just the way it is sometimes. We take a hit on a job market, get a huge unexpected bill, or unavoidably get sick. Still, there are times when we don't save money even when it's within our control. And we can see it as both a good thing and a bad thing. On one side, it's a bad thing because when saving is within our control and we still weren't able to do it, that's usually because of something we did or didn't do. It may be hard to admit, but in these cases, it's really our own fault why we haven't been saving. On the flip side though, this just means that we can easily turn it around by changing some of our financial habits to put us back on the right track. And that's just what we're gonna do in today's video. Let's go over some budgeting tips that we can use for a fresh start towards financial independence. If you're new here, welcome to Gray Skies Media, and we're here to help you invest in your future. Be sure to give this video a like and hit subscribe if you want to learn more financial tips and tricks. Overspending is a huge problem many people have, and it's so common that sometimes we don't see it in ourselves or even in other people. We're not saying you have to be nosy and look at what other people have on their plate, but when you take a look at yourself and other people around you, you may realize it's more common than you think. Sometimes we might miss it in our conversations, our interactions, but believe me, it's there. Sometimes the simple solution to it is being more efficient, finding better deals, using coupons, watching out for sales. There's a lot we can do to save money and keep our pockets full. To find concrete solutions, we should first ask ourselves, what are the reasons why we find out so hard to save? Well, we'll tell you. The first reason is simple: ignorance. Sometimes we just aren't aware of where our money goes. It may be because we don't have a regular budget or we don't really review our expenses, making it easy for us to spend money in unexpected ways. We may think our occasional shopping or maybe our daily coffee is a small expense, and we don't notice it adding up to a bigger one, making it harder for us to save. The good news is, a simple problem like this has a simple solution, and that is to keep track of your expenses and developing a comprehensive budget. One type of comprehensive budget that you could work on, for starters, is something called a zero-based budget. With a zero-based budget, you make a list of your income and your expenses. Then, you figure out how much money you want to set aside for every expense. Just adjust your targets until your expenses match your income. You're basically setting aside every dollar you earn for a particular use before you even get it in your paycheck. What makes this even better than most popular budgeting styles is the fact that it's comprehensive, which means it includes everything you get your money from and everything you put it into, from your regular bills and payments to irregular expenses like a new phone or maybe a trip to the dentist. Percentage-based budgets would usually have you focus on just a few categories, but comprehensive budget would have more categories based on your usual spending habits, which would help you figure out your financial problem areas and give you a better idea of how to solve them. One case in point would be the 50-30-20 budget, which divides your spending into three basic categories: 50% on your needs, 30% on your wants, and 20% on emergency funds or maybe settling debts. Speaking of needs and wants, another big reason why we tend to overspend is because we don't understand the value of the things we spend money on. What this means is that we grossly put too much value on certain things that may not really be important or even worth buying. So much so that we neglect the things that really matter. We buy things impulsively and later get buyer's remorse. One good way to avoid this and get better financial clarity is using a value-based budget. It's kind of like a comprehensive budget, but with a different goal. With a comprehensive budget, we're making lists of awareness, but with a value-based budget, we also take into account the things that we think we should put more value into. This kind of strategy would involve taking a deeper look into our expenses and experimenting on ways we can be more efficient spenders and have more money left to spend on things that we want to concentrate on. Another way we can divert our focus on more valuable things is to have a spending cleanse or a spending challenge. Spending challenges are actually pretty popular. They're challenges you do by yourself where you avoid spending money on certain things that you consider to be unnecessary expenses. Challenges like these can help you determine what's truly important to you. You'll figure out what things you can't live without and things you can just easily rid yourself of. Think of it as a financial Marie Kondo method. What is it that really sparks joy? What are the things that you really want or really need? Speaking of which, let's take a look at another reason we overspend. If you're anything like us, you might have spent some money on small rewards for yourself as a coping mechanism for any effort you've made or any stress you've accumulated. Have you ever said to yourself, "I did a pretty good job at this, I deserve something"? Well, these habits make another reason for our overspending and our lack of savings. We shop till we drop to make ourselves feel better about something that makes us sad. We eat out when we celebrate promotions or even smaller accomplishments. Sometimes we might even find ourselves scrolling through Amazon listings out of boredom and check out an item or two. It's just a habit a lot of people have, and it has even become second nature to some. We may not realize it, but it's a habit of having financial triggers that can lead to some trouble in the long run. So what do we do about it? One common practice is journaling to give ourselves some better insight on these sorts of expenses. It also helps us to look back on our emotions of sadness and excitement and channel them into an activity that doesn't involve spending money. You can also try talking to a friend or a loved one and get their opinions on the situations we go through. Give yourself a game plan on how you can control these triggers into something productive but not expensive. Another spending habit that can prove to be counterproductive is impulse buying. With the popularity of social media and the abundance of social media advertisements, it's quite hard to look away. Studies have shown that it's more difficult to resist temptation when it's more frequently shoved in our faces. And that's just what happens when you're on social media quite often. It's like our stamina when we go on a race. You'll have no trouble sprinting in the beginning, but in just a few seconds, you'll feel the burn in your body and will want to take a rest. In the same way, when you're exposed to all sorts of temptations, later on you'd want to just give up and give in. The solution is obvious. Just lessen your exposure to these temptations. Limit your use of the internet. Take a breather. Read a book. If this isn't feasible, there's also purchase delay or consumer procrastination. You can use a simple test to delay your purchasing decisions or procrastinate on making your order. Wait for 72 hours. This lets you think on the purchase. Is it something you still want after waiting that long? Still got it etched in your head and you can't stop thinking about it? Unless it's urgently needed, this delay tactic can help you really think about what you buy. And who knows, you might even find a better deal after 3 days. It's also helpful to leave your debit or credit cards behind when you're going somewhere you know you are likely to be spending a lot. Leave your plastics at home and don't touch your online banking apps. While these days, a lot of people go cashless, having cash on hand instead of debit and credit cards can actually be an effective way of keeping your spending in check. It's so easy to spend money when it's digital. That's why a lot of people also budget their expenses using the envelope method, where you stash your cash in categorized envelopes or other forms of storage. By segmenting your tangible cash and only bringing money you intend to spend, you're less likely to overspend because you're physically limiting yourself. Even when you see something tempting when you go shopping, you'll have to stop yourself as long as it costs more than what you've got in your pocket. Ask yourself, do I have enough money for this right now? Asking questions is important when we try to contextualize our expenses. When asking ourselves what's valuable in our spending, we sometimes forget to leave a little bit for a rainy day, and we fail to realize the impact of our spending on our personal finances in the present and future. It's easy to see on the surface. I mean, when you've got $10 in your wallet and you buy yourself a few bars of candy or a subscription on HBO Max, suddenly, you don't have $10 anymore. There's nothing really wrong with spending money. But just like Newton's third law of physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In the case of financial decisions like these, when we spend money on one thing, we lose an opportunity to spend money on something that can be more valuable. $5 that you spend on a single cup of coffee is $5 you lose on something you could have put towards your retirement or life insurance. Ask any investor or financial advisor, and they'll tell you about small regular expenses can snowball into bigger amounts due to the compounding interest, which can really set you back when you're trying to save. There are two ways that people use to try to reevaluate their spending and broaden their perspective when it comes to determining the amount of money you have to put into your retirement. Let's start simple with the real hourly wage rule. This is a concept discussed by the author Vicki Robin in her book, Your Money or Your Life. Basically, what you do is figure the hours of work you would need to put in order to make a certain purchase or expense. That's minus the other work-related costs like taxes or transportation. Buying a $1,000 icon might not be too big of an expense if you're earning upwards of $50,000 a year. But after taking other work-related costs into consideration, that could add up to a lot of work hours. That's even more when you earn a smaller annual income. Now, if you invest that $10 over time, you can use the 300x rule. The 300x rule is a way of reanalyzing your expenses based on the impact it can have on your financial freedom. How does that work? Well, it works by showing you how much money you would need to save and invest based on what you want to have in your retirement nest egg. This works best with regular expenses like a streaming service subscription, but not one-time expenses like a candy bar or a cup of coffee. This sort of scheme is based on a research by a retired financial advisor, William Bengen. Through his research, he discovered that a diverse investment portfolio should be able to reflect inflation-adjusted withdrawals of 4% of your savings at minimum for at least 3 decades. In simple terms, for every dollar you spend in a year, you have to set aside $25 to support it. With any existing investments, you should be putting away roughly $300 for every dollar to support their costs, which is how it got its name. Going back to our earlier example, that would mean that for every $10 you spend on a Hulu subscription, you would need $3,000 to cover that expense when you're living on your investments during retirement. The question is whether this expense is worth $3,000 worth of extra savings, and if it's a yes for you, then by all means, go ahead. But if this sort of reevaluation turns out that 300-fold of this cost can be too heavy on your investment expense, then you might have to rethink your regular expenses. Maybe try sticking to one subscription service at a time. At this point, you might be thinking, there are so many rules to spending my money. Why do I have to think about something so far in the future when I could be spending my money now? This is a pretty common mindset a lot of people have, and sometimes you can't really blame them. But this is also something that we can easily turn around. It's not unusual to feel discouraged when you're so far from retirement, and you might also feel complacent because it's so far into the future. The key here is to break down our big goals into smaller ones that can be achieved faster and easier. Think of donut holes. Smaller, easier to chew, easier to swallow. You don't have to eat the whole donut if it's too much for you. You can take it apart one piece at a time. It's the same with your financial goals. Make smaller goals within achievable timeframes and give yourself a reward once you achieve it. It'll make you feel like you're progressing when you've achieved something bit by bit. If you're trying to earn $10,000 in a year, why not give yourself a monthly goal of $1,000? Don't give yourself too much pressure and take it easy. And don't beat yourself up when you don't hit a target. Failure is just a part of life, and it's easy to stumble along the way. Sometimes, that's just the way it is. Saving money is a huge challenge, but we hope these tips help you to be more introspective and more efficient when it comes to your expenses. If you've learned something new, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Let us know any questions you want answered, and we might just do that in our next video. See you next time.